My name is Troy Luginbill. I'm the manager at Lynden Village Books and Paper Dreams here in Lynden, downtown Lynden. I have a background in anthropology and archaeology, a degree, a bachelor's degree in anthropology archaeology, master's degree in museum studies. I used to work as the director and curator at the Lynden Pioneer Museum, or now Lynden Heritage Museum, and initially started my life at the Little Professor Book Center as my first job in college. So,
all right. You said a master's in museum studies?
Master in museum studies, yes.
What does that entail?
Oh, that gets basically into all the legal ramifications, moral ramifications, and methodologies of presenting history in a neutral fashion, interacting with your community, many of the different models and things that you can do to do that. Museums collect. What does that mean? What are the legal ramifications of collecting? How do you establish a collections policy? How do you collect and curate based upon what the goal is? So it's the details of basically how do you make sure what the history you're grabbing or whatever collection the museum is grabbing is the right collection and for the people that want it that way. You know, that's the thing. I mean, any given group defines a collection.
Right.
So in this case, in the case of the Lynden Museum, it would be, of course, Lynden.
Well, yeah. So expand on that a little bit. Like, small town Lynden has a small town museum, except it's not really that small of a museum.
Who knew?
No, it's a bit unassuming. So give us a bit of an explanation on what made that museum special.
What made that museum special is Lynden. Lynden is one of those communities that I found from a fabulous history. They don't do anything half-assed. If they commit to it, they're going to succeed.
That's the technical terminology too,
and that right there is the businessman's terminology. An example is one year they decided that they wanted there at least used to be a contest called America in Bloom, in which cities from all over the nation competed to be literally the most beautifully gardened city out there.
I recall this. Yes.
Okay. And I'm trying to remember when this was. At one point, Lynden determined, by God, we're going to do this. We're going to be the most beautifully gardened city. And by that, it's not just downtown. American Bloom was like people's backyards. It's like a group of 6 people came out and they poked into every nook and corner of your city.
Wow.
And when Lynden decided to do this, it was amazing to see. They organized and they've only gotten better. I couldn't even begin to imagine how well they would do now if they were to re-enter. But they organized. There were like regional areas, gardener areas. They partnered with how many different garden clubs? I can't remember. But out of the entire nation of over 600 competing cities, they took second.
Wow.
And the only reason that they didn't take first was because the city that beat them out, and I cannot remember the city, was in the Midwest, had spent a lot of money on one big center garden piece in their downtown area.
Stinkers.
So, so it's things like that. It was, I think the Northwest Washington Fair. Lynden decided that Whatcom County needed a fair. So next thing you know is a year later, it's downtown, and then ultimately is now the 3rd largest fair in Washington State.
Is it actually?
It's in the top 10. I know that. So it's, like I said, Lynden never did anything small when it put its mind to it. And so the museum was no exception. The American Bicentennial Project was coming around. And one of the things you could do was be recognized as a bicentennial community. And the federal government gave a list. It was something where the U.S. would recognize you officially as a bicentennial community. And you had this list of things that you could do to get points. So you could have an oral history recording session, a display at your library, plaques, and a museum guaranteed it. If you put together a museum, you were automatically a bicentennial community. So Lynn is like, okay, we're going to put together a museum.
All right.
And at the time, there was a local family, a guy named Fred Polander had amassed a large, well over 50 buggies in his early retirement. He's a fabulous story. If you ever have a chance, I don't know if you know Fred Polander III or not, but that's his grandfather who did that.
Gotcha.
He amassed this incredible collection of antique buggies, which was really unique because at the time, antique buggies were considered passé. You were lucky if you could find them. The car ruled. And so nobody wanted a buggy anymore. You might find one out in a barn somewhere. So when people heard he was collecting buggies, they literally were just like, "Oh, hey, Fred, you want my buggy? It's just stuffed in the back of the barn," that type of thing. And so he put together this collection. And so there's the bicentennial piece, Fred's collection, which made an immediate collection to display, and it seemed a natural fit. And so the city got itself together and they figured out the partnership that was going to establish the Lynden Pioneer Museum, which would house the Fred Polander buggy collection and preserve the history of Lynden and central Whatcom County. And then 1977, it opened. At the time, it opened where the current location is now. And in 76, again, one of the aspects was that building was the old John Deere implement dealer, and it was up for sale and had been up for sale for a few years. And so everybody's sort of looking at going, "Oh man, there's this big building in downtown. It's all empty and nasty and stuff like that." So putting a museum in there was great. It preserved that aspect. So it sort of became this win-win-win situation. And then from there, it just grew. Just like everything in Lynden seems to. It just grew. Next thing you know is within, at 77, within 7 years, they're adding on, doubling the size of the museum. You have a number of retired carpenters, contractors, and everybody who wanted to help. And you begin getting the homestead built, and the Front Street exhibits about the different buildings and businesses on Front Street. And it, like I said, it just grows and grows and grows. Then I come in as an intern, find out that working at a museum is way better than working archaeology in the United States. So decided to hang on, interned for about a year and a half, then got married, had a kid, said to the board, "If you guys could, I could really use a part-time job while I finish college." The board's like, "Well, you already have." I was interning as effectively the curator at that point in time, as the exhibits curator.
Right.
But beginning to develop collections. So they said, "Yeah, let's just hire you as the curator." A couple years later, the previous curator had retired. And then a couple years after that, the director retired. And so when the director retired, I went and said, "Well, I need a 40-hour-a-week job. That would be really nice." His was a 20-hour-a-week. How about I become the director curator? And then 23 years later, I ended up transitioning over to Village Books.
Oh, it's quite the history.
Yeah. So, and it was, and it was the reason I ended up transitioning was because all those people, when I first started as an intern there were only 2 left when I left. It was over the course of those 27 years, I watched people that I considered to be very, very good friends. Many of them were surrogate grandparents to me,
right.
Aunts and uncles, and they passed. And I found myself looking around and I couldn't see the vision anymore. So I knew it was time to leave, because the vision is what runs that. Just like it was what runs all the really important things that occur in Lynden. The Northwest Washington Fair, it's vision that runs that. Right. The churches in town, it's vision that runs those churches. It's when Lynden gets a vision, it does it.